Hey, what is going on guys? RvzStealth here, and in today's video, we're going to be taking a look at the best junglers for patch 7.4. One quick thing to note though before we get into the video is that I do have a Discord server now, so if you guys do want to join that, I'm not too sure how often I'm going to be on there. I'll probably be on there like at least once a day at some point, so if you guys do want to join the Discord server and just talk about certain things, then you can go ahead and do so. But with that being said, let's get started. So starting it off in the tier 1 for this patch is going to be Graves. So with a lot of other junglers getting nerfed recently, Graves has definitely rose in popularity, and he's also rose in strength over these past few patches. He's a great lethality user right now. I would say that building pretty much full lethality on Graves is your best bet for this patch right now. He just has such good one-shot potential with that build. He's one of the only junglers that I feel actually does have like 1v5 carry potential as well. If you get fed on Graves and if you have the mechanics to play him, you can definitely just outplay super hard in team fights. You can one-shot someone with your Q alt combo, and then you can just dash around dealing consistent damage with your autos too. And that's another reason why he's just such a great carry pick, is because he does a lot of burst damage and he also has the potential to do a load of consistent damage. And then a few matchups here that Graves is struggling with a little bit in this patch are Ivern and Shaco. He really doesn't have too many counters though in the jungle right now. If you can play a good Graves, then I don't really think that any jungler really counters you. For example, Ivern does win more against Graves than Graves wins against Ivern, but that's kind of because like Ivern, if it does reach the mid to late game and you're up against the Graves, then you are going to do a pretty good job at just negating Graves' burst damage with your shield and also disrupting him in team fights with Daisy. You still do have the potential to like beat Ivern early game though and snowball really hard, so Graves in this patch is a great pick. I think that you should be picking or banning him if you can. So next up here is going to be Shaco. Now Shaco in this patch with the lethality build is super good right now. I think that in this meta, Shaco is one of your best jungle picks just because this meta consists of very immobile AD carry champions. In the bot lane, Jhin and Varus are the most picked AD carries right now, and in team fights, or once it does reach the mid to late game, you have a 5-second stealth on your Q, I'm pretty sure, or it's like some crazy duration like that. So in those mid to late game team fights, you just stealth in with Shaco and you basically just one-shot the Jhin or the Varus. Because they don't have any mobility like other than their flash, it's just going to be very easy for you to assassinate them and be very useful in those team fights. You wouldn't think that Shaco is like the best team fight jungle champion, but in this meta right now, he's actually not that bad at all. He also does have a lot of different build options for this patch. I would say right now lethality is probably your best bet, and that's probably the best build if you want to hard carry with Shaco. But some other Shaco players and some high rated Shaco players, they go for more of a bruiser Shaco build where they go like Trinity Force, and they go for more of like a tank build after that. Some of them go like ZZ Rot Portal to just be really annoying. It just does depend on your playstyle though. And then I would say that he's probably the best jungler at snowballing the early game, and he's one of the best junglers. He's one of the best junglers that you can play if you do get a lead with him, because if you get ahead with Shaco, you're basically guaranteed to one-shot the enemy squishy in every team fight and give your team a 5v4 advantage. And then as for a few Shaco counter picks in this patch, there really isn't any jungler that's doing great against him statistically. As you can see here, Ivern is like the closest jungler to doing good against Shaco in this patch, but Shaco still does have a 0.5% win rate against Ivern. I would say that in this patch right now, if you want to beat Shaco, then you either do have to match him with a strong early game jungler, or you do have to play like a scaling jungler or more of a tankier jungler and just hope to get to that mid to late game, because if Shaco does end up snowballing the early game right now, there's really not much you can do against it. And then for these next 3 junglers in the tier 1 here, I did have them in the tier 1 for last patch, and they're staying here for this patch as well, so I'm not going to go too much into detail as to why these champions are tier 1. Next up in the tier 1 here is going to be Ivern, and Ivern is probably the cheesiest, most annoying jungler to play against, but because of that, he's just super strong right now. You can go for some really cheesy invades with Ivern, keep the enemy jungler down and keep the enemy jungler behind. Your ganks in the early game are also really strong with him, because what you do with Ivern when you gank is you walk in with your E for the slow. You're basically guaranteed to hit your root or blow a flash, so it's just very easy to get your lane snowballing in the early game with Ivern. And if you do end up getting ahead with Ivern, then your item power spike is very early on into the game. You end up getting your Athenes and either your Locket or Redemption around the 15 to 20 minute point, so it makes his mid game super strong and it makes his team fighting extremely good. So when you do get ahead with Ivern, and if you get your lanes ahead, then you should be always contesting objectives and just trying to team fight, because with the Ivern shields and with Daisy, it's very hard for an enemy team to beat you in those mid-game team fights. And then as for a few counters to Ivern here, there really isn't too many in this patch as you can see, but if you want to beat Ivern, I'd say the best thing to do is playing a strong early game jungler and trying to take advantage of his weaker dueling potential in the early game. So someone like a Shaco, a Rengar, a Graves, if you pick them against Ivern, look to invade him, look to catch him out and 1v1 him, because you are going to win that 1v1 a lot of the time, and that's how you can shut down Ivern. Next up here is going to be Kha'Zix. So Kha'Zix is still really good. He did drop in win rate a little bit, and he's not like as OP as he was a few patches ago, but he's still great with lethality now. He's still one of the best carry junglers that you can play. His 1v1 potential early game is super good. He also does have a load of damage and just a lot of burst damage if he does find a target isolated, so that does allow him to get a nice snowball going. If he can end up catching out the enemy jungler and he gets the jump on them, then like 99% of the time, Kha'Zix is gonna win that duel, especially if he is level 6 and he does have his Q upgraded. So in this patch right now, Shaco, Warwick, and Rammus are doing pretty well against Kha'Zix as well as Ivern. I would say that Ivern, I don't really agree too much with that statistic, or you shouldn't really pay attention to that statistic too much there. It says that Ivern beats Kha'Zix like 57% of the time, but with Kha'Zix, if you can take advantage of your early game and invade the Ivern, then you're not going to do too bad in that matchup. It's just that with these champions, or the reason why these champions do well against Kha'Zix, is because if you do reach the mid to late game and you're like max builds on like Warwick and you're max build on Kha'Zix, then that Warwick is going to beat you like 99% of the time, just because if you try to jump in a team fight or you try to be useful in a team fight, then Warwick can just ult you, Rammus can taunt you, and Ivern can do a good job of keeping you out with his stun and Daisy. And then to round out the tier 1 for this patch is going to be Rengar. So similar to Kha'Zix, Rengar really didn't get affected too much by his nerfs. His nerfs did not affect his damage at all. I'm pretty sure the nerfs that he got were like to his W and also to his ultimate. I don't think they touched his Q damage or any sort of damage in his kit. So he still is great in this meta right now with lethality. Also with those squishy and mobile AD carries being played, it's just so easy for you to be successful on the champion, especially if you do get ahead in the early game. Your one-shot potential is still there with Rengar, and you're a very strong carry jungler. And then for a few counters to Rengar in this patch, as you can see here, Shaco, Ivern, and Warwick are tending to do pretty well against Rengar and Kha'Zix. I said that Shaco in this patch is doing really well against pretty much every jungler, as we saw before, but for like Warwick and Ivern, they pretty much do well against Rengar for the same reason they do well against Kha'Zix. If Rengar tries to jump in and assassinate your target or his target in a team fight, then Ivern can just throw the shield on his teammate, Warwick can ult you, so it's going to be a little harder for you to carry against those champions. And then moving on to the tier 1.5 champions now, these champions are a little bit weaker than the tier 1 champions in my opinion, but they are still great carry junglers and they could be tier 1 quality as long as you do know how to play them well. For example, if you can play a good Hecarim but you're not too confident on your Rengar, then Hecarim would be like tier 1 quality for you and Rengar would probably only be like tier 2 or tier 3 quality for you. So in the tier 1.5 here is going to be Nocturne, Hecarim, Vi, and Warwick. So Nocturne right now, the reason I'm putting him in 1.5 and not in tier 1 is because he does have a pretty weak early game in comparison to like a Kha'Zix or a Rengar. He doesn't have the best ganking potential early game, and when you play Nocturne, you're really focused on getting that level 6. It's level 6 where he really does start to shine and where he can be very, very effective. But if you do end up playing against a really good early game jungler and they can snowball before you do hit level 6, it is going to be a little bit harder to carry as Nocturne. He's great though right now in this meta against those immobile AD carries, and he is also really strong with the lethality. And then as for Warwick, he is probably one of the best skirmishing junglers in the game right now. I would say that if you run into a 2v2 situation and say you're like ganking top lane and the enemy jungler comes to gank top as well, the likelihood of you winning that 2v2 is super high as Warwick, because if you're level 6, you've got your ultimate and you also have your fear, so it just makes him a great pick at like counter ganking. He also does have great ganks at level 6 with his ultimate, so if you are looking for like a tanky bruiser jungler, then Warwick is great in this patch. And then for Hecarim and Vi right now, both are still really good carry junglers. They aren't really benefiting from lethality at all though, as some of the other junglers are, and I don't think they have as strong raw carry potential as someone like a Graves does or a Rengar does. If you're newer to jungle though, and you don't have the mechanics to play someone like a Graves or a Rengar, then I would definitely look to pick up Hecarim or Vi, because they're very strong engage bruiser junglers. And then to round out the video here, in the tier 2 is going to be Zac, Elise, Lee Sin, Evelynn, and Rammus. So for Rammus right now, I think he's super underrated. I put him in my last sleeper OP video because right now in this meta, lethality is super strong and tank champions just do a super good job at countering that lethality. Now with Rammus, you do an even better job at countering lethality because you build full armor on Rammus if the enemy team is full AD, and you can still deal so much damage because of your passive. So if the enemy team does have like an AD mid laner, like a Talon, if they have a Varus in the bot lane, and say they have like a Kha'Zix in the jungle, then Rammus is great for this patch. So for Lee Sin and Elise right now, they are pretty good in this meta, but they're only as good as the player is on them. So if you don't play a lot of Lee Sin or Elise, I would not recommend picking them up for ranked unless you do play them quite a bit in normal games. There's just a lot of easier, less mechanically intensive junglers that you can play and have a lot of success on right now. And then lastly, for Zac and Evelynn right now, Zac is one of the better tank junglers that you can play. There really isn't too many tank junglers in this meta. It's more of a carry jungler meta right now, but if you are lacking a tank, then Zac is one of your better choices. And then for Evelynn, she is one of the best snowbally early game junglers. If you do fall behind with Evelynn though, you're not going to be very useful at all, and she isn't a champion that I would recommend like blind picking, just because she does have quite a few counters. Like Rengar can absolutely destroy Evelynn if Rengar gets the jump on Evelynn, and if Rengar can get ahead. So she is a good pick in the right hands and in the right matchup. So that is going to be all for this video, guys. If you did enjoy, then please be sure to leave a like and subscribe if you have yet to already. So thanks for watching, have an awesome day, and I'll see you in my next video.